What's going on, guys? It is Tempest from WrestleTalk.com. I, of course, am joined by Sonal Lad to talk the G1 Climax tournament. We've got days 5 through 8. I know last week we only talked about like days 3 and 4, and it was a lot easier to go through 2 days in an hour. But this time we've got 4 whole shows, and they were a good 4 shows, so we're going to have a lot to talk about. But first, Sonal, it was your birthday yesterday, so happy birthday.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your day? You got to see a G1 show, so it couldn't have been that bad.
Well, that was the first thing I noticed when I was looking at the G1, especially because it's in in autumn, which we never get. So I was looking down, I was like, it's on my birthday. And then when they announced the cards and I looked down at it and I was like, this is one of the cards I was most looking forward to. So yeah, I watched some wrestling, chilled out with my family, and yeah, it was nice to wake up like knowing I was like, oh, I've got wrestling, and it was great.
Yes, well, you're lucky enough that you don't have to wake up crazy early to watch these shows. I will also have a G1 show on my birthday coming up in about a week, but it means I have to wake up at about 3 a.m. to watch it. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm glad you had a good time, and it was one of the shows we were most looking forward to as well. You know, it was the first B Block show that Andy Datson and I covered live on the channel here. But like I said earlier, we kind of have a lot to get through. We probably won't go through every match, but we'll go over at least the best and most important matches of each night, kind of give our thoughts on it, and go from there. So, I mean, Day 5 is where we are picking up from last week. As far as block matches go, it started with Taichi and Yujiro Takahashi, which, I mean, it wasn't the match I was most looking forward to or anything. You could probably skip this one. It was an all-heel matchup, but, it was what it was.
I sort of want to give a shout. Like, I know like Yujiro's not been winning matches, and he's been constantly on the first card of the blocks, but I feel like compared to what's been happening in the past, this is actually a really good opportunity for Yujiro, because I'm going to say something similar with like Yoshihashi, but it's only going to be good for him to get all of these matches. He might lose them all, and that's probably going to happen. But hopefully going forward, New Japan can see that, yes, Yujiro can put on, like, if you give him the opportunity, he might be able to put on some good singles matches, and hopefully it will give Yujiro confidence to build on his experience with all these big stars, and then hopefully move himself slightly higher on the card.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. As far as people in this tournament go, I still think he's probably the bottom rung of the ladder here. So I don't know how much moving up he can really do, but the G1 is always an opportunity for people to show the best of themselves. So we'll have to see going forward. But the following match was Minoru Suzuki versus Jeff Cobb. Now, I thought this was a really good match, but this to me stuck out as, I think I mentioned it on the last show, that last year, Zack Saber Jr. was a victim of his placement on the card, where even when he faced Koda, he never had a main event match in last year's G1 Climax. So his performance, it's not that he had bad matches, it's just that he wasn't put in the position to have amazing matches. And
because he wasn't given the time and things like that.
Exactly, yeah. Because, I mean, these cards build, and the biggest match is meant to go in the main event. That's just how it works. And I feel like this year, Jeff Cobb is kind of a victim of that. He's often put in like that first or second match on the card, and he's been having really good matches. But if a match with Minoru Suzuki, for example, was put in the main event or semi-main, I think they could have done a lot better.
Well, I think that's the big thing. They made the most of what they did. They had this certain set time. They went after Taichi and Yujiro. They got the crowds back excited about the bigger action. But you're right, I think Jeff Cobb has so much potential, and I feel like New Japan hasn't capitalized on that. We saw that, obviously, he didn't win the New Japan Cup, the America one. Even when he had his never title reign, it was really short. And I think if they push Jeff Cobb, he has the ability to be in the main event of so many of the cards.
Yeah, I thought he might have won this match because I thought a never openweight title match with Suzuki would have made a lot of sense for him, but it didn't happen. So we'll have to see how he does for the rest of the tournament. But I don't know, it just kind of stuck out to me that this was a match that really could have done that much more if given, more time. But following that was Kota Ibushi and Tomohiro Ishii. Now, this match was just phenomenal. I mean,
this match
these
should
two
have
work
been
so
higher
well
on the
together.
card. It should have been a
Well,
lot
see,
higher on the card.
this is where a match like this just kind of suffers by happenstance. This card was probably the most stacked of the tournament, at least so far. We're going to get into the next 2 or 3 matches, but you look at Shingo Takagi and Will Ospreay followed that, and then Jay White and Kazuchika Okada. So it's not like either of the matches that were put on after this one were duds or anything like that.
No,
it just happens to be this was an amazing match that also happened to be third from the top. And I mean, these two just work so well together.
I think that's the thing. They are so different, but when they get put together, it's almost like there's a new side brought out of them. Because we know Ishii. Ishii is I saw on Twitter someone said like he might not win, but he is always one of the standouts in every tournament. And this one was so different because we saw a different side to Ishii and a different side to Ibushi, because Ibushi's not really had as much experience with bigger opponents like Ishii. But then on the other side, like, apart from a few maybe never matches and stuff, Ishii's not had really a challenge with someone so quick and so agile, maybe except in tag matches. And I just think that this is something that could easily main event one of the larger shows like King of Pro Wrestling or Dominion, because they just work so well, their psychology, their moveset. It was honestly one of the standout of the show.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think it's one of the standout of the tournament so far. Going just beyond the show, their striking is so good, and it's so different from other matches, that Ibushi has had and Ishii has had. A match like this, while Ibushi and someone like Will Ospreay are very similar build-wise, and they both do high flying, a match like this and a match like Ishii's match with Ospreay, completely different. And I think that just continues to speak towards how good the G1 Climax and the New Japan roster is as a whole, mixing up different styles and everyone truly being different. And we'll see this even more in the next show that Ishii wrestled on. We're absolutely going to talk about that.
We have to talk about that one.
Yes, absolutely. But as I said, Shingo Takagi and Will Ospreay was the next match. Personally, I think this was the match of the tournament. It so far is the only match in the tournament to get a 5-star rating from Dave Meltzer for, whatever that is worth. This was just excellent. You knew it was going to be because their match in the Best of the Super Juniors was, match of the year last year. But these guys just absolutely worked together so well.
And I think it was almost, there was a story behind it. We always saw in the Best of Super Junior. And we spoke about this last time, where it's almost like they both had very different heavyweight routes. So, for example, we've said that Ospreay has almost been ricocheted to the top, whereas Shingo has really had to work, and we've seen him pick up quite a few losses at heavyweight. And this was almost the retribution, like Shingo had something to prove. He had to prove, I belong in the heavyweight division, and I will beat Ospreay. I couldn't beat him as a junior, but I will try damn hard to do it as a heavyweight.
Yeah, and that like you kind of said, we touched on it in the last show, that their paths to the heavyweight division have been so different. And this just goes again to show that the match that they had in the Best of the Super Juniors and this match were completely different. They had very distinct styles and very different styles in the Best of the Super Juniors, where Ospreay's speed was going up against, Shingo's strength. And that was the real, clash there. But this match was so different from that because Ospreay, it's not that he's still not agile, but he's put on that extra weight. So the style is different. And the style being different means that this match, while also being great, was different from their last match. I just loved it. I can't say enough good about this one.
But I also like that they still had the essence, so there was still high flying in it. There was still Ospreay hitting it. But then it was also Shingo's proved, yes, he's now a fully fledged heavyweight, but he is still as fast as Ospreay is. And that's the thing. People are saying, well, Shingo should never have been in the junior heavyweight division because of his size and his style. But really, that's what I liked about Shingo in the junior heavyweight division, is that he showed that there is not one type of junior heavyweight, like similar to things like El Desperado, and in this match specifically by winning, he showed that, you know what, now we're on an equal playing field with weight, strength. I can beat you, and it's set up because now they're tight, sort of set up for a fact that they can have another match, like more rubber matches, and we can have more amazing matches just like this.
Yeah, that's a great point, and if I saw this match every day of the week, I don't think I would ever complain. I could see them going at it again down the road, doesn't matter when. Wrestle Kingdom, Dominion, a New Japan Cup match, literally whenever they want to have this match again, I think they'll deliver. It's just incredible stuff.
Have got a thing. We can probably have Shingo challenging for the Rev Pro title.
Excellent point. Yes,
so that could be something we see at King of Pro Wrestling, maybe.
Yeah, you never know. We'll have to see. It'll all kind of depend on how both guys do in the tournament. Obviously, if Will Ospreay or Shingo Takagi win, for that matter, I think they'll have bigger fish to fry. But if they both lose, I could definitely see that match coming at Power Struggle or something. Beyond that, we had the main event of Jay White and Kazuchika Okada. Now, Jay White was able to win this match and get the 3-0 record to start, the polar opposite of what he did last year in the tournament. And it was just another step forward in the ongoing kind of storyline between Jay White and Okada. And I do like that Jay White had Okada's number at first. Like their first few matches, he got the win. Got the win in the G1 2 years ago. Then he beat him at Wrestle Kingdom. And since then, Okada's kind of had his number. He beat him at, the G1 Supercard and going forward. But now, Jay White is back on top. And what is that going to mean? We're going to have to see. Jay White obviously has done very well for himself since coming back to New Japan. And Kazuchika Okada kind of still hasn't really found his way since losing the titles at Wrestle Kingdom. So it's always a very interesting dynamic when Okada isn't quite himself. He's not the Rainmaker that we all kind of know, and he's taken a step back.
I think that's perfect what you're saying. Like, for me, I've always thought that Okada and Jay, their chemistry has been one of the best. I've always enjoyed their matches ever since the betrayal. And I think that's almost sort of when you touch upon Okada not being himself, it's almost reminding me of the time after he lost the title to Kenny and he had the red hair and things. And it's almost like, are we seeing the real Rainmaker now? And was it because of his place on the card recently, his inability to get those wins? Is what hindering him in the G1 this year? Yeah, he's picked up some wins, but against Jay White, he's lost. He's lost against Kota Ibushi, the big names, which maybe this time last year or the year before, it would have been easy to say Okada would have won it hands down.
Right. And I mean, you look at last year's tournament where he went in as the champion. He didn't lose a match until, near the end with the match with SANADA. So he had the best 10 or 11 match stretch, since Masahiro Chono did it, decades before. So it's all very interesting to see, like you said, the Rainmaker where he came out with the red hair and the balloons and everything, just not really being there. And I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing right now. He definitely is at his best when he is the champion. But of course, he's going to have to find ways to get wins without having the title. So what that means going forward, we'll have to wait and see. He's still my pick to win the whole tournament personally. So we're going to have to see. He could end up, just finding his way and really coming together and stringing together a bunch of wins. But at the same time, maybe I'm wrong and someone else wins, we'll have to wait and see.
But you've said that, and you almost said, like you said, Jay's gone the opposite way from last year. So last year he lost his first three and now he won his first three. And it's almost like, are we going to see the complete opposite for Jay? So I've got Jay to pick to win, but is that going to go on its head? Because obviously we'll talk about it later on, the first loss that Jay had. Right.
Because he won out on the tournament last year. If he strings together the first 3 wins and then loses out, I'm sure we'll see a meltdown or two. But that brings us to day 6, and of course we do have some lovely people in the chat. We do have a lot to get through, so we won't be able to pay as much attention to the chat. Of course, if anyone sends in a super chat, we will of course be reading those out. But Broken Scythe, it's very nice to see you today. True Heel Heat Wrestling is back, of course. Good friend of mine on the show. Says, hey, Tempest and Sonal, ready for another awesome podcast covering New Japan Pro Wrestling. Cobb needed that showcase match, and it will be against Ishii, like much of the A block. Yes, I mean, if you want to have a great match, putting him with Ishii is a very good idea. And more discussion just about who's going to win and who's had good matches, and so on and so forth. So that brings us to day 6. Now, day 6 to me was kind of interesting. It was a little bit lacking to me personally.
A lot of people have said that on social media. I've seen that.
Yeah, like it just wasn't quite there. None of the matches on this card really stand out from the rest of them, and in the G1 overall, for that matter. It started with Yoshihashi beating SANADA, and we kind of talked about it last week, where I really wanted to see SANADA get wins and not be beaten in matches to kind of make him look bad. This, to me, was one of those matches. Like, if SANADA went out there and lost his first few matches to people like Tanahashi or, Zack Saber Jr. or something like that, it's one thing. But to have had him now lost to Toriano and Yoshihashi, I don't really like that.
I almost think I actually really liked the match, because I thought, for me, it was two men who have really struggled so far in the G1. And I almost see Yoshihashi's winning as New Japan really trying to push him. Like, he's not won, many matches, but they're really, we'll see in the matches they're having from yesterday's, that they're really pushing him to be the guy who's putting on these good matches. And the fact that he did beat SANADA, and it wasn't even a match for me that was simplistic. It went for quite a while, and also it was almost like who was going to win. So I think I definitely agree that it was very bad for SANADA, but I think the Yoshihashi fan in me was sort of quite happy that he got a win over a big name like SANADA, and it was a very good match.
It was a good match, which is worth saying. To me, when you have someone like Yoshihashi, who is kind of like an established mid-card guy, like lower mid-card, it's different to see him beat someone who's kind of upper mid-card than if you saw someone brand new coming into the promotion, doing something like that. Like if Jay White, when he came into the company in 2017, 2018, if he was able to beat SANADA on his way up, that to me is like, oh, okay, Jay White is now above SANADA. He's climbing, he's on his way up. But when you've seen someone like Yoshihashi kind of be the lower level of chaos for so many years, to me, I don't think his stock rises that much in beating SANADA. It just lowers SANADA's stock that much more. And I'm not a huge fan of doing that. I mean, obviously, SANADA ended up getting a big win in this tournament, and we'll talk about that for sure. But I don't know. It's not what I would have done, personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was definitely an interesting choice for them, and I almost feel like they knew what was going to happen with SANADA. And that's why they almost thought, right, well, if we can push Yoshihashi slightly higher, people aren't really going to remember SANADA's loss, but they will remember Yoshihashi's win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'm here to remind people of SANADA's loss. I'm not going to let them forget about it. But the following match from there was Kenta and Zack Saber Jr. Kenta was able to get the win, and this was another double heel match. And Zack Saber Jr. has had a bunch of them going, in the first 3 or 4 matches of this tournament. I thought this was another good one. Again, none of the matches on this card really stuck out that much, So I feel like, again, they probably could have done better with more time and a better spot on the card. Because again, they were second on the show aside from the Young Lion match. But I don't know, it was fine. I will say I really do like the Kenta kind of heel work of messing with the crowd, where they can only clap right now, so they're doing their best. Everyone kind of integrates their own unique clapping rhythm. Juice Robinson has done the "We Will Rock You" beat and that sort of thing. but whenever Kenta goes in there and tries to get people to clap, he does it like a total irregular beat and rhythm just to mess people up. And I do like that. Stuff like that I think is creative and very appropriate for the times right now, I shall say.
And I almost say, when you were saying that, thinking about his post-match comments, it's sort of been the string that he's been doing since he's in New Japan, like his communication with the cameraman. And I almost think like that adds another layer to Kenta's character, that he's not just a heel, like he has charisma. And he did a really good promo. I can't remember if it was that show or one of them where he spoke in English.
Yeah, it was the match with Juice.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that it's like, he's putting on really good matches. And also when he comes back and speaks to the camera, he's connecting with the audiences in a way that most heels don't even try to do. But then he is cementing himself as his own kind of bad guy, rather than just a stereotypical, like, oh, I'm going to insult the crowd, I'm going to go back and complain a bit.
Well, yeah, and it's almost interesting, like, it's almost like he's an American heel who happens to be Japanese. Like going back and doing the post-match comments in English, stuff like that. Like, you don't need to do that, but it's just another thing that sets him apart from many of these other wrestlers. Like Taichi doesn't do that, so it separates him from guys like that. So I enjoyed the match, but again, I didn't think it was like, it's not one that I'll remember when the tournament is over. And that kind of goes the same way for the next match of Hiroshi Tanahashi and Juice Robinson. I thought this was maybe Juice's best match of the tournament. His match with Yoshihashi was also very good. So it would be between one of those two. But Tanahashi was able to get his first win. So I was, very, very happy to see that for my boy Tana. I do really like that, and I did like this match. It was a match of former partners, a good double babyface match, and Tana was able to get the win. So I mean, again, another good one, but nothing that will stand out to me.
I think the thing about this match that was good is, if you saw Juice at the start, he tried so hard to have this aggressive side. He even said it in the post-match comments. He tried to have a chip on his shoulder. He tried to sort of despise Tanahashi and everything he's worth. And it's almost like, at the start, I thought Juice was going to win, because he did seem to have that number on Tanahashi. He was getting aggressive. It almost looked like a heel versus babyface match in the way that Juice was reacting to Tana. But I think, like he said, Tanahashi is not the ace. He's the ace for a reason. And the way that even in his 19th year, he can come back and put on great matches and then switch the complexion of a match in like a second just proves how good Tanahashi is even now.
Yeah, and I mean, he's been one of the top performers in the block so far, and anyone who knows who Hiroshi Tanahashi is, that shouldn't surprise you too much. We do have a super chat that's come in from Abhinav Tirumala, so thank you very much for that. I believe it was asked earlier in the chat that we didn't quite get to, who the most overrated and underrated person on the roster would be, and he says most underrated is Kenta, and most overrated, in his opinion, is Juice Robinson. So I don't know if, it's tough for me. I feel like a lot of people in the New Japan roster kind of fit in where they're supposed to. There's very few times where I would, like a year ago, I would probably say like, oh, Taichi's the most overrated, just because I hadn't seen him have that really good match yet. Mm-hmm. But then he started having good matches and putting on better performances. So, I mean, that has really helped. Besides that, I mean, it's really tough. Like there aren't a ton of people, who really stand out to me. Even like you'd say someone that doesn't stand out to me is like Master Wato, but I mean, I can't really say he's overrated or anything. He's not, he's not being pushed like that. So I don't know.
Especially with Master Wato, you were saying, for me, I think he's quite underrated, because especially when he debuted, there was so much rubbish spoken about him on social media, and I started watching New Japan just before he went on excursion. So for me, I was almost like, when people are like, oh, he's going to be rubbish, I was like, just give him a chance. Like, he has an amazing style, mixing Mexican from his excursion and Japanese style. And I think it's always going to be depending on people, like when they got into New Japan, because there'll be some people who say, oh, well, Juice is overrated, but have they seen his journey from starting as a young lion and basically starting from scratch? And the number of times he said in the G1, like, there's an amazing group of wrestlers and then Juice Robinson.
Yeah. Yeah, I may have agreed with you about maybe overrating Juice Robinson. Like, I know he's amazing and does great stuff. Um, but his performance in the G1 so far has really impressed me again. So I'm very happy with that. I mean, overrated. I'll say like Yujiro Takahashi, just because I don't think there's a whole lot there. As far as underrated goes, I don't know. I'll say like Yuji Nagata and Satoshi Kojima, just because they're still great, but obviously aren't put in the position to be in tournaments like this anymore and stuff like that.
I think my underrated, I've said this so many times, Yoshinobu Kanemaru.
Yeah.
Like, I know he's got the titles now, but in matches, it's almost like Desperado is always that main guy. But I think there was one match that they had where Chris Charlton said it. He went, and I think Desperado said it. It's like Kanemaru won the match for them. He might not have got the pin, but he is always that person that you can depend on. And I think people almost forget about him in Suzuki-gun. Because obviously you've got the bigger personalities like Zack, Taichi, Desperado. But Kanemaru is a veteran, and I think if he gets a singles shot with as the junior heavyweight champion, it would be an amazing run, just like his tag runs have always been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. You know, he's getting up there in age and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, you know, Kanemaru is great, and we see that whenever they do a best of the Super Juniors and stuff like that. So definitely good choices and good, you know, options and everything like that. If you want to tell us who you think is the most overrated and underrated wrestlers in New Japan in the chat, feel free to do so. And just before we move on to the main event here, Antonio Correa says, Tempest and Sonal, thoughts on Harold May being fired from New Japan Pro Wrestling and his reign in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Well, it's interesting because I did see a report over on WrestleTalk.com, which you can all go and read, that apparently someone in AEW has said that, like, Harold May was an idiot who didn't understand the business. And apparently there was a lot of heat on him for not being able to get Kenny Omega to stay. So it kind of seems like, you know, we were asked this during the live reaction podcast that we did, that we didn't know whether this would make them closer to a New Japan AEW relationship and stuff like that. But coming from this report, it kind of sounds like maybe Harold May was part of why that wasn't happening. And I'm obviously, like, you have to take each report with a grain of salt. But at the same time, if this does get closer to a relationship like that, maybe this isn't so much of a bad thing.
But I also think, I know when there was first rumors that Harold May was going to take over New Japan, and there was a lot of negative stuff being said because obviously he wasn't Japanese and things like that. But I almost want to sort of bring it like that. He has done quite well. Like, since the Elite left, there were so many people who've said New Japan is going to fail, it's going to not have the height. And it has stayed for so many fans right at the top. And I always think that you can't disregard what Harold May has done with New Japan USA and things like that. And I mean, we've seen who the new person who's taking over, and it's just going to be a new stage in New Japan. And hopefully we might get close to an AEW and New Japan thing, but I think New Japan will be fine whatever happens.
Yeah, I mean, they're not hurting too bad right now. You know, I just think if you have the ability to cross promote with AEW, it just opens up so many possibilities for unique storylines and kind of mending a fence that would really mean a lot to people if you could see Kenny Omega come back and have, you know, another match with Ibushi or Okada or something like that. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. But yeah, I mean, you kind of said it with, you know, Harold May's reign and everything like that. But going forward, we'll really see how much of an impact he had and if anything really changes. So to finish off day 6, we had Tetsuya Naito defeating Haruki Goto. This, to me, was probably the weakest main event of the tournament so far. I'm really not feeling Haruki Goto in this tournament so far. Like, I don't know what it was, because I know these two have had really good matches together in the past. You know, Haruki Goto especially will have amazing matches with people, but I'm just not feeling it this year. You know, he's very mid card for me right now.
I sort of I hate to agree with you because anyone who follows me on social media knows like I love Hiroki Goto so much. Like when people have said, "Oh, I don't really like him," I always love him from his music, his gear, the way he wrestles. And yeah, I have so many hopes for Naito versus Goto because, like you said, we've seen them in the past do amazing things. Separately, they're amazing wrestlers. Together, they're amazing wrestlers. And I don't know, something just felt slightly off. And I hate to say that about Goto. And because obviously Naito, as usual, he does what he needs to do. He puts on great matches, but it's almost like something wasn't clicking with Goto. And I really hope that something changes because Goto is an amazing wrestler, especially in G1s. And it'd be a shame to see him sort of go to like the undercard straight after.
Yeah, and they always kind of find a place for him coming out of the G1, you know, heading into Wrestle Kingdom. It's obviously not at the top of the card or anything like that, but I don't know. I don't know what it was about this one. You know, I kind of said like even in the first match, like when he beat SANADA and going on from there, it was like, okay, he beat SANADA, but I know this isn't Goto's year or anything like that, and they're not doing anything storyline wise to get me emotionally invested in his run. You know, they had done that last year where he had that first match with Jay White, you know, and Jay White was, you know, really giving him a hard time, you know, saying like, "You're not going to beat me," you know, it's an easy first match for me, and Goto had to fight and claw and get through that first match, but I just don't see anything that should make me care this year, and that's, you know, really disappointing.
I almost think that Goto would have worked better in the other block. So there are people that he has history with. So him and Suzuki for the Never title. Him and Ishii would have been amazing because it's not only interfaction, but they're both the Never champions. Shingo, Jeff Cobb, like we've seen those matches. If he was an A block, maybe we can move Yujiro to the side. Like JY again, I think that it could have been Goto if he was in the other block because he would have put on some really standout performances with those guys. And maybe it's just a matter of it's the wrong side of the block he was on.
Yeah, and I mean, you make a really good point there where I mean, as far as the push of guys like this, there isn't too much of a difference between someone like Goto and someone like Ishii. You know, they're both kind of that like upper mid card, you know, they're like the threshold for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, where they're excellent wrestlers, but they're not quite given that next push. But Ishii continues to have these really great matches, and Goto right now has kind of slipped a little bit for me. So it's a little disappointing, but I do think having the placement in the A block has really helped Ishii. Although if he was put in the B block, I don't think it would have hindered him as much as it has Goto.
Yeah, I think he might have actually had a shot of maybe picking up a lot more points and getting higher in the ranks because obviously it's completely different. I think it depends on what way do you want your wrestlers to pick up points or do you want them to have amazing matches? And personally, I would prefer them to pick up points, especially for someone like Ishii and Goto who have yet to get that heavyweight championship match. But I feel like with Ishii in A block, it's like you said, it's not hindering him not getting points, but putting on these amazing matches because he's getting put on shows so much, especially for new fans.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail right on the head there. You know, I think that just about covers it for both Ishii and Goto. You know, and that kind of brings us to the end of day 6. So we've got day 7 and day 8 left to go. Now, I think obviously day 5 was to me the best match or the best show of the tournament. It had the most stacked card. It was the one I was most looking forward to. But day 7 also had some really good matches, especially the main event. So we'll kind of go through a few of these kind of quickly. We had Minoru Suzuki defeating Yujiro Takahashi. It's Yujiro. It's expected. You know, they had a double heel match. It was kind of similar to Suzuki's match with Taichi, at least right out of the block, where they were like choking each other, going at each other right at the bell, that sort of thing. But obviously, you know, Suzuki had a much easier time with Yujiro than he did with Taichi.
But I'm going to say, like, again, I feel like I keep repeating this. Like, for Yujiro, it was quite a good match. Like, I saw it quite a lot. Like, we have not seen this fire in Yujiro for a long time. And yes, it was probably one of Suzuki's weaker ones because of who it is. But for Yujiro, like, these are big matches for him, and he is proving that, like, he belongs in New Japan, and they are some of his best matches he's had in a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that does go a long way for someone's reputation in New Japan, especially when they're, kind of perceived as being the weak link. But, again, I mean, personally, I would have preferred to see someone else in the block than Yujiro. Obviously, you need that guy who's going to take a bunch of falls, but I think a more well-rounded performer probably would have made this block like even more legendary. To me, he's the only blemish in it.
I know I wanted Kojima in it so badly, and when he wasn't announced, I was very upset about that. Bread Club. It's all about Bread Club.
Absolutely. It's all about the Bread Club. So moving on from Suzuki and Yujiro, you had Ibushi and Jeff Cobb. Now, I mean, I kind of said my piece about Jeff Cobb with the first show, where Ibushi and Jeff Cobb could be like a 4.5-star classic match if given more time. But again, he's second match on the card. He's not picking up the wins in this tournament that I was kind of hoping or expecting he would. Obviously, he's still not one of their guys yet, but he could be. And I thought this tournament might be the start of something like that. Obviously, there's still time for that, but he didn't get off to the hot start that I was kind of hoping he would.
I think, though, it was the right thing, because we saw Ibushi beat Ishii, and I think this was a similar thing. It was almost like if Ibushi had lost, maybe people would have called his win against Ishii a fluke. But I definitely agree with what you said. Like, I thought last year was going to be Jeff Cobb sort of like feeling out process, like trying to work out his way through, and this year it was going to stand out. And it has been disappointing, and you're literally right. It's placed on the card just like Ibushi versus Ishii. Any higher, it would have been like way up there and probably one of the best matches of the tournament so far.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make clear that I don't think he should like be beating Kota Ibushi and stuff like that, because I think Ibushi, for sure will be like a player in the final days of this block. But I definitely thought like you move the card around a little bit, and Jeff Cobb probably could have come out of the first 3 or 4 days with more than just one win, for example. But moving on from there, we had Okada and Taichi, and now this was like, I think obviously their match earlier in the year was much better than this one. Their match from the New Beginning tour was one of Taichi's best matches, but this one wasn't as good as that one. It was still like a fine match, don't get me wrong, but to me, a match with Taichi really needs like Okada's Rainmaker transitions and everything. Him fighting for the Cobra Clutch, I don't think helped matters much at all in this one.
And I always think the fact that Taichi didn't even tap out and it was a stoppage, it has hindered Taichi not only as like a wrestler that like I personally like, but people like, but as a tag champion. Like people seem to forget that Taichi has a belt around him, and to have Okada beat him in that way, we know Okada probably won't really be that interested in the tag champions. Like, we've seen that before. He's been in a few tag leagues, but it's never been his main thing. So I almost feel like if they had maybe the Rainmaker done, it would have been fine. But having Taichi literally just pass out like that, it hindered him in a lot of ways, especially after the big win against Suzuki. Like, oh, you can beat the submission king, but if Okada gives you a submission, you can't fight out of that one.
Yeah, it's weird, and it's a lot of New Japan trying to level out the blocks and everything like that. I get that Taichi maybe necessarily couldn't go 4-0 to start. That might be a bit pushing it a little bit. It would kind of back them into a corner of having him either lose out or do especially well. But it does make it a little bit hard to, suspend your disbelief when you got a match with Suzuki immediately followed by the match with Okada. But again, they see Okada as their golden boy, and, and that's just kind of how it is. Following that, we had Ospreay and Jay White. Now, this was a very different match from, ones that Ospreay had previously, but still excellent. And again, we keep talking about the differences in styles between different wrestlers. Jay White has one of the most unique styles in the entire roster. And especially with a guy like Will Ospreay, you know that matches together are just going to be phenomenal.
The funny thing is, I said this, we were talking about this match possibility, and I said it's going to be, if Jay White loses this, it's going to be because he's going into it very cocky, and he literally takes Ospreay a bit too lightly, and I think that's what happened again. And I think a lot of people, I think they knew that if it was going to be a loss, like Ospreay was probably going to beat Jay, because Ospreay is so loved in Japan, and it almost feels like it's the right thing. Like having him beat such big names, and then maybe say, okay, well, I'm obviously flying through this tournament. Ospreay is going to be nothing. Like he's basically just become a heavyweight, and then to have Ospreay beat him, it's almost like, wow, like Jay can't like rest on his morals anymore, and it's probably going to be sort of, it's either going to make Jay White or it's going to break him. Like you said, we might see another breakdown, or it might be the making of him to go, right, I need to get back on top of everything.
Yeah, and this to me is an example of if Jay White is able to make it out of the A block and out of the tournament as a whole, if he wins the G1, maybe this is the match we see at Power Struggle again. You see Will Ospreay face him for the G, or not for the G1, but for the Tokyo Dome title shot. You know, so that just gives us an example or a reason to see this match again. I don't think anyone would complain about that necessarily, but there's a lot of different ways you can come out of this match in particular, whether this is the start of a slide for Jay White, or if this is just like the one blemish on his record that allows someone like Kota Ibushi to kind of stay neck and neck with him going into the final days. We're going to have to wait and see. You know, I don't know if Jay White's going to make it out of the block, but he could definitely do that, you know? So a match like this is important to make everyone kind of, you know, to allow people to stay in the hunt.
I almost think it's also with Jay losing that, it was the fact that nobody in A block is now undefeated.
Yeah.
And I think Chris Charlton put out something that nobody in the whole tournament now is undefeated, and that has not happened for a very long time.
Yeah, I had seen that as well. I mean, it's very different from the way that they have done tournaments in the past, where usually someone will go undefeated and someone will lose the first few matches, and then either they'll lose out or the person who's lost like a first two, like Ibushi and Okada last year was a good example. Ibushi lost his first two matches and then won the rest of his, you know, matches, going all the way until the A block final with Okada, beating him and advancing to the G1 final. Whereas Okada was able to win and win and win and win, finally lose to SANADA, which brought them close together, and then lost the tiebreaker match to Ibushi. We don't have that this year. And it's going to be really interesting to see how everyone kind of levels out heading into the final days of the tournament, because there's, you know, obviously there's so many possibilities, you know, now that everyone's kind of on a level playing field.
I think it just makes it more exciting because we don't know. Like, I made predictions, most people made predictions, and I already think one of mine is probably out the window, and it's almost like, but it could easily change because in the long scheme of things, we're still quite early in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Walu TV, which is the mayor of Painesville, Dan from the website, says, if Jay White's downward spiral is continuing, will he end up in New Japan Underground and fight the Young Lions? Somehow, I doubt it, Dan. But thank you for your comment.
I also feel bad for any Young Lions who have to go. It's like any Young Lions against Suzuki. I'd feel bad if you put him, because we already see Jay White assaulting them on his way to the ring, so I can't imagine them putting him in a match with one.
Yeah, I mean, we've luckily for them, guys like Lance Archer have left the promotion, so their abuse has gone down slightly, but still
only a little bit.
Only a little bit, exactly. And going from there, we had maybe my personal favorite match of the tournament. It was definitely one of the best ones, and that's Ishii and Shingo Takagi. They had one of my absolute favorite matches of the year last year in the G1, where just like Shingo Takagi is so amazing and so incredible because he can have matches like this right after his match with Ospreay and have them be like just polar opposite. You're not going to find many different wrestlers from Will Ospreay to Tomohiro Ishii, but still he's had maybe the two best matches in the tournament back to back, and they're completely different from one another.
I mean, Shingo and Ishii have both been putting out, and like you said, they are so different, the matches, from the ones that both of them had with Ospreay. And I almost think that people probably went into this match thinking it was going to be a certain type, it was going to be hard hitting. But I think I've said this about Ishii and Suzuki before. It was surprisingly fast paced, and a lot of it was just them just hitting each other, but it was a very dynamic match. There was no one moment where you were like sitting there twiddling your thumbs. Like, there was always something going on, and for two men of that size, you don't always see something like that.
I think that's a perfect way of saying it. Like, when you see guys who are bigger head, well, I know Ishii is not like tall or anything, but he's a big thick boy. When you see guys like that, often it's a much slower and much more plodding match. And this is the complete polar opposite of that. And you said that this match was dynamic. That is the perfect word I've used to describe Shingo in the past. Like, every movement that he makes is capitalized on to the just fullest degree. They just have so much good chemistry together. This to me is a rivalry that I would like to see them go back to. Like, put these guys in the same block of the G1 every single year, because I will never get tired of this match. Even if it didn't quite live up to last year's match, I just will never get enough of this stuff. I absolutely love it.
I mean, that's why I was upset I wasn't upset when Suzuki won the Never title, but I was almost a bit upset that we didn't get to see Shingo versus Ishii for the Never title, because if there is three men who epitomize a Never title, it is Shingo, Suzuki, and Ishii. And I know that, like, New Japan fans, we're not really used to triple threat matches, but I feel like if you had a triple threat match with the three of them for the Never title, it would be absolute chaos, but in like the best way possible.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of how we saw the four-way junior title match at Wrestle Kingdom 12 with Hiromu, Kushida, Marty Scurll, and Will Ospreay. How it was just like 25 minutes of just like absolute insanity. I feel like this would be the same way, but a completely different kind of insanity.
I mean, we won't see people jumping off
top ropes. Yeah, exactly. Instead, it would just be three guys like absolutely, decimating each other's bodies physically as opposed to acrobatically. So, yes, sign me up for that one. If they want to do a rare three-way match, I'm all forward.
I mean, it might just be 5 minutes of them just punching each other in a triangle just in the center of the ring, and I would take that. I would watch 20 minutes of that.
I would go to Japan and watch it live. I don't even care. That to me sounds like a dream match. So that brings us to the end of day 7. So we've only got day 8 left. Now, day 8, obviously, people are talking about the main event first and foremost. Luckily for you, it's the show that happened on your birthday, so you probably have the best recollection of everything that we saw here. But we'll go through. The first 2 matches were short, so that helps. Juice Robinson beat Toru Yano in more of a comedy match again. It was Yano's first loss. He taped Juice Robinson's legs together. Thankfully, Juice was able to escape from that and ultimately get the win. So, kind of having to bring Toru Yano back down a peg. He got hopefully all of his wins out of his system early on, and now can kind of go back to just trying to be the spoiler as much as possible.
See, you say that, I was distraught when from the start when I saw Juice rip Yano's t-shirt. I was upset when I was like, Juice, you have ruined Yano's chances of winning this G1, because you know what? This year's been crazy enough that the idea of Yano winning the block doesn't seem too out of the ordinary.
Well, he's the king of pro wrestling. He's got that trophy for a reason. But after that, we had an even shorter match, which was Zack Saber Jr. and Haruki Goto. And I mean, everything that I'd said earlier about Haruki Goto just being like just a guy in the mid card, this exponentially, made that even more so. Like, Zack Saber Jr., I think he beat him in like 3 minutes and 59 seconds or something like that. It was really short.
It was the shortest. I think I was in shock because when it happened and the ending, and I was just like, what? Like, is this shorter than the Yano matches? Because normally Yano's matches are always the shortest. And I was almost like, what? Wait, did I miss something? Have I somehow gone into an alternate universe? Because the idea, Zack's an amazing wrestler. I'm not going to take that away from him, but for him to beat someone like Goto in less than 4 minutes, I know there was an injury there, and from the start, Zack targeted that, but even still, whether there was something really wrong with Goto and they had to stop it. Like, Goto is never one to back down that quickly.
Yeah, and I do think you need a rare match like this in the tournament that just like, oh my god, it's over. Like, holy smokes, something like that. And they usually do stuff like that where someone's able to get that really flash quick pin. Usually it's in a Toriano match, but it is interesting to see it happen in other matches as well. It just kind of further exemplifies like why I don't really care about Haruki Goto in this tournament.
I think, though, it worked really well for Zack, because last year Zack's tournament was not great at all. And I think the fact that this year, like, the wins he's had some quite good wins, and the fact that he's done this one in less than 4 minutes, it's a bit of redemption from last year, because I know last year so many people thought he was going to probably win his block, and he literally did the complete opposite. So I think Zack's needed this run in the G1 so far, and this win over Goto especially just shows why Zack is one of the best.
Yeah, I would like to see him continue to do well and move into the top tier of guys in his block heading into the final days. I think he could really, really use that, and obviously we didn't see that last year. We did kind of see it 2 years ago, but still not quite the same thing. I would like to see him do well, especially in a B block that doesn't quite have the depth that the A block has. And then we had Tanahashi against Yoshihashi. And if anybody saw the live reaction video that we did for this show yesterday, you know how much I hate it when these two wrestle each other just because I can't say their names. I can't say Tanahashi and Yoshihashi without getting my tongue twisted. So I'm going to do my best, but I did think it was a good match. And this to me was one of the bigger examples of Yoshihashi kind of coming out of his shell a little bit and being like, oh my god, is he going to beat, Hiroshi Tanahashi in the G1? Because he didn't, but I thought for a while he could.
I feel like maybe if you're having struggle with both the names, just call him Nobu. That's what Tanahashi's been calling him in the post-match comments. Like, I will beat you, Nobu, which then gets me slightly confused with Kanemaru, because that's what I call him as well. But yeah, it's another example of the fact that, like, yes, Yoshihashi's doing well, but Tanahashi can bring out the best in so many people. And he, like, I keep saying, like, he is the ace for a reason. Like, he not only puts on good matches and gets win, but he brings out the best in other people. And you're right, there was a point where I was like, Yoshihashi is actually going to win this. Is Yoshihashi going to beat the ace? And obviously in the end he didn't, which was the right thing. But it's elevated both of them. It's given 2 points to Tanahashi, but it's not made Yoshihashi look bad in any way.
Yeah, this to me was a perfect example of a match that makes both guys look good, because going like 15 to 20 minutes with Yoshihashi isn't going to make, Tana look bad, per se, as long as he gets the win. But being able to hang with Tanahashi for that long does make Yoshihashi look that much better. And this to me does a lot more for Yoshi than like his match with Evil or things like that, where he does well, but, the guy cheats to win and blah, blah, blah. This to me was, a much better performance for both of them, really. And then we had one of the matches, because the last two matches were really why we did the live reactions, because I was very interested to see what was going to happen. We had Evil and Kenta, the Bullet Club versus Bullet Club match, and we kind of got some answers into what a lot of people have been wondering about, because Evil and Kenta, Kenta went up to do the too sweet, and Evil turned away and just gave it to Dick Togo instead.
So Dick Togo, and always the spoiler for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to see what happens coming out of this tournament. But this to me was definitely like a wink, wink, nod, nod. Something's gonna happen here. We've been really thinking about like Evil and Jay White and stuff like that, because Jay White is the de facto leader of Bullet Club, and Evil kind of took over in his absence. But this was really kind of interesting, because Kenta and Jay White kind of seemed to be more of like a team, going into the pandemic.
Yeah.
They wrestled a few tag matches, and they were, Jay White made sure to say like, oh, it doesn't matter who's on top of Bullet Club as long as someone's on top, that sort of thing. So to see Evil and Dick Togo, go out of their way to cheat and beat Kenta, that it'll be very interesting. And the match itself was fine, but the interference was It's another typical Bullet Club match.
I think it worked well because I think we've seen, obviously Kenta doesn't have anyone with him. So Kenta has been winning fairly cleanly. And this was the first time we've actually seen him properly go for like sneaky start, obviously knocking out the ref. And I feel like I want to shout for the New Japan refs because they go through so much during these matches. But we saw Kenta get the briefcase and try and use that to his advantage. And I almost think like, yeah, we all expected it to be Jay White and Evil fighting for this, but we need to remember that Kenta and Evil have not met each other both as the same members of the same faction. And I think they are two completely different people from personality-wise, wrestling style. And I don't know, I think I almost expected Kenta to win this. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty surprised when Evil did.
Yeah, I would probably have to agree there. I think they're going to try and push Evil as much as possible, given, what happened earlier this year for sure. But this to me was one that could have gone either way. And Evil took it, and we're going to have to wait and see what comes out of it Bullet Club wise, going into January. And that brings us to the main event of SANADA beating Tetsuya Naito. I believe Chris Charlton said this is only like the third time that a faction leader has lost to someone in their faction. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting, man. This one, I was really looking forward to any of the Los Ingobernables matches, throw Evil in there, like any of the combinations of those three guys. Storyline-wise, it's going to be probably the most, thick and heavy matches in the B block. And we for sure saw that with this one. They had obviously by far the match of the night, one of the better matches of the tournament. Yeah. And SANADA was able to get his first win over Naito. The most important thing to me was that Naito still went out of his way to do the LIJ fist bump with SANADA at the end, because it's very easy for the heel to kind of be like, nah, screw you, man. I'm going to take a shower. But
especially instead, Naito as a champion and being who he is as a person.
Yeah, and he still went and did that and gave him that respect. So it didn't feel like, oh, the whole faction's going to blow up, now that this match has happened. But I think this is definitely the match that we're going to see at Power Struggle if SANADA doesn't win the tournament.
That's the thing. That's why I like going into it. You said the storytelling was almost like Naito was saying, he's like, well, you all expect SANADA to win, but I'm going to make sure he doesn't. And it's almost like, I thought SANADA was going to win, but when Naito said this, I was like, right, well, Naito is very determined now to make sure SANADA doesn't win. It might actually go, and then when SANADA did win, it's almost like, right, I was right, but for a very short time, I doubted myself because Naito put that seed of doubt in my head.
Yeah, and I mean, like, this match itself was just great. They work really well together. Obviously, we haven't seen them have a block, match, because they wouldn't wrestle otherwise. But we haven't seen them wrestle in the G1 in a couple of years. So it was a refreshing match that we're not used to seeing. I was a huge fan of this. I think Naito hit, like, I don't know what he calls it, where he does like the move where he flips over the guy and kind of does like a natural flexion.
Because I was trying to figure out what it was, and I was trying to listen to the commentary, and I think it was something like Esperanza or something, and that was an amazing move. Right.
Yeah, he's kind of messed that move up a few times because it is kind of complicated to hit with a bigger guy. It's kind of like Darby Allin's flipping stunner move. But this to me was the best he's ever hit that move. And someone in the chat earlier said that the Destino isn't nearly as protected as it once was. That's for sure.
It takes two Destinos nowadays to get a win, which I think it's similar. I think we've seen that with Ibushi's Kamigoye as well, and even the Rainmaker and the High Fly Flow. It's almost like there are very few protected. I think the Blade Runner is probably one of the most protected ones in New Japan.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are definitely matches or definitely moves that are more protected than others. If Kenny comes back, the One-Winged Angel is still like the most protected move in pro wrestling, basically. Aside from certain comedy moves, but we're not going to get into that. That's neither here nor there. But this match to me was like a really good for storytelling, and it helped again level out the playing field a little bit. You can have 3 losses and win the G1. So if SANADA now goes on a run, he could definitely pull through and have you know, a real big performance going into the final days. Because right now he's still set to face Evil in the main event of the final night. So that could be an indication of those two being like really close together in points heading into the final day. You know, we're going to have to wait and see. Maybe it won't end up that way, but looking ahead, that's just my assumption.
And we almost see like he's been beaten now by the lower guys. Is this going to be his redemption? That not only is he got to win and he's going to get a winning streak, but he's going to win over those big names, like over the names like obviously he's beaten out like Evil and things like that. Not just obviously we've had Yoshihashi, Yano, and Goto. Like that is going to make people forget about the first 3 losses if he can pick up wins over the big guys.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. A couple of people are saying that the move was Gloria. No, Gloria is a different move. I am aware of that. Gloria is a different move, so...
I don't think he's ever botched Gloria. I think Gloria he does pretty consistently.
Gloria is not a particularly difficult move to hit, but it is different. And yes, I will say that if SANADA is able to beat Hiroshi Tanahashi, I think that will be really telling as to where this tournament's going to go for him. Mm-hmm. But that kind of wraps things up here. We've hit the hour mark. You know, we're not going to go too much longer. But obviously, we want to thank everyone for tuning in this week to watch our review of the G1 Climax. We will be back next week on the eve of my birth to check out the next week of pro wrestling in New Japan. And we will have ton more to talk about, as we always do. I'm going to be more sleep deprived, probably hooked on caffeine even more than I am right now. Obviously, you can follow both of us on Twitter. You can obviously see our hashtags, or not hashtag, but our handles on the screen there. Sonal Lad is at wrestling_chat. I, of course, am at Tempest WT. Of course, you can like and subscribe to Wrestle2 to make sure that you get all of New Japan pro wrestling coverage that we provide. There's a ton of it, and hopefully, fingers crossed, there's going to be more of it even after the G1 concludes, especially going into Wrestle Kingdom. We're going to have to see what happens. There's tons of possibilities, but thank you very much, Sonal, for joining me again. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. Thank you to everyone in the chat for joining us as well, and we will see you next week.